Welcome everyone, Tactical Ish here, and today we have a battle from the Iron Sharpens Iron internal league of the Night Crew clan, where clanmates fight against clanmates, brothers stabbing brothers just to hone each other's skills. Now for the players, we have High Elves played by yours truly versus Dwarves played by Fat Kid at Recess. For the army builds here, I am going for a super wide army, 2 rangers on each flank. In the middle there, a front line of 5 archers backed up by a second line of white lines of strays. I'm trying to send out those archers to soften up the dwarf front line and perhaps the artillery as well before my heavy infantry moves in for the kill. Further back, we have some Eagle Claw bolt throwers to counteract those dwarf artillery, and leading the army, we have Imrik on foot. You don't really see this guy without mounts, but I do love his foot form for the relatively cheap cost and very solid supporting kit. Dragonhorn, pretty much a staple, an army-wide melee attack plus fear buff. And on top of that, Lord of Dragons, a very solid significant melee stat debuff, minus 24 melee defense and minus 40 attack. He is supported by a live mage, bringing only earth blood to heal up all the high elf units. And that's it for the High Elf army builds. Now let's have a look at the Dwarf box, where we have a front line of miners with blasting charges, supported by a couple flame cannons. These guys are very strong. The cost reduction and range increase really makes these devastating firepower worth it in the new meta. At the back there, a bunch of dwarf warriors and quarrelers guarding the rear and flanks of the dwarf box, supported by a couple slayers as well. Leading the dwarf army, we have pretty much the staple lord, Thoric Ironbrow on his Anvil of Doom. The dwarves also have their own version of Wa, and it comes with Thoric's mount. Rune of Doom, a melee attack buff that is almost identical to Imrik's Dragonhorn, but slightly better in the sense that it does not have a limit to its use. Everything else of the two abilities are pretty much the same cooldown, same duration, same effects. Anyways, on the far side of the battlefield, Vanguard deployed 2 very sneaky rangers with great weapons. If you watched my previous videos, you might remember where I got ambushed by dwarf rangers on this exact same map and suffered a brutal loss. Now with the army builds done, let's get the battle started and see if I fall to the same trick twice. With the recent range increase, the flame cannons would give the archers a really rough time before the archers can even get in range and start firing their bows and arrows. At the back there, the Eagle Claw bolt throwers will try to return fire and snipe out some of these flame cannon artillery models. You can see that one of the models has already been knocked out. So it is actually a very effective counter artillery measure here. But the problem is that the rangers with great weapons are sneaking up. They are in stock, so they are hidden. I am not seeing them coming, and I'm not prepared to deal with them. So the rangers can actually get into range and start peppering my bolt thrower crews with their throwing axes. Now in the front line, some of these archers have got in range and start opening up at some of these miners, doing some HP damage but not killing any models, giving the flame cannons the time to blast away my archer line. Now I will be moving in some of the archers, hopefully trying to shoot at the flame cannon crew and knock them out. But unfortunately, a lot of these archers have already taken devastated damage. Half the archers are already gone. At the back there, the bolt thrower crews are also taking a lot of casualties from the dwarf ranger ambush. Of course, the High Elf leadership keeps the artillery crew in the fight, and they will continue to snipe out some of the flame cannons. 2 models down, 2 more to go, but before they can finish off the flame cannons, I'm afraid they are gonna get routed by the dwarf rangers. The archers are very focused on shooting at the flame cannons right now, but at the same time, the dwarves are pushing up the miners with blasting charges, trying to push away my archer line. I'll continue to fight with the archers, but that also means that they'll be staying in a static formation for way too long. Now the miners will be unleashing a volley of blasting charges, blowing up the entire formations of these poor high elf archers. Very unfortunate for me there, as this lapse in micro cost me a lot of my missile units. These ones are routing, the others also took some heavy losses, but at least once they get back to safety, they can start shooting again. Now with my missiles compromised, it is time for me to activate my melee infantry. White lines of strays moving in, but they got welcomed by a volley of blasting charges. Thankfully, they do have the armor and missile resistance. That mitigates a significant portion of the explosive damage, though the explosive charges still have enough knockback to interrupt their charge animation, reducing their charge impact damage. On the other hand, you can see that the white lions that didn't get blasted are smoothly hacking through all the miners. Another volley of explosions into the white lions of Shrey's doing damage to friends and foe alike. So I'll be counteracting the damage with a bit of Earthblood, Dragonhorn also boosting up their melee attack stats, and I was able to shred through all these first line of defense of the dwarf box. Rangers moving in, same goes for the other side here. Some of them even moved into the rear position of the dwarf box, now threatening the quarrelers. The dwarf warriors will be moving in to screen away my infantry, but unfortunately these quarrelers will be silenced. White lions, all of them, are just moving forward, trying to push aggressively against the dwarf box. And the balance of power is slightly against my favor right now, as a lot of my missile line are just all the way in the back here taking damage, while my infantry push is also suffering from the flame cannon overwatch fire. Another lapse of micro on my end here, with the white lions standing still taking damage from the flame cannons. However, the lions pelt 30% of missile resistance helps them mitigate a lot of that damage, and also they are in loose formation, taking less damage than a densely packed archer line or spear line. These rather depleted white lions are surrounded by a horde of Dawi, and the burnt leadership debuff means that they're not gonna hold for long. They might be high elf elites, but the wrath of flame cannons is still too much for them to handle, especially with Thoric's Rune of Doom adding fear to all the dwarf units, further impacting their wavering leadership. The dwarves buffed up by this version of their WoW are trying to push back the high elves. But a second wave of white lions have moved in and are now holding back the tide of Dawi here. All these dwarf warrior slayers are being pinned down by this half-health white lions, supported by Imrik himself. Over here, white lions sandwiching the quarrelers and dwarf warriors with the help of rangers and hacking through the dwarf formations. Miners who does not have blasting charges will be moving in, perhaps trying to do a rear charge against the white lions of Shrey's, while over here, quarrelers who have been secured from all my infantry threats are now returning fire against the archers. With their shield and heavy armor, they are trading very cost efficiently against the lightly armored high elf archers. On the far side, there are rangers cutting through the miners, but heavy armor means that the rangers will take some time before they can deal with the dwarf infantry. White lions, tattered ones, also fighting some equally tattered miners and should be able to win that fight. While over here, flame cannons, there's the one model firing point blank at the white lions of Shrey's. These guys are tattered and are burned, and perhaps a couple more volleys of direct hit will be able to rout them off. Unfortunately though, the formations are kind of spread out right now, and the flame cannon shots with only one model left, the rest are sniped out by the eagle claw bolt first before they got routed, so the damage output is very limited so far. At the back there's, for some reason, this one flame cannon crew decided to push up into melee, trying to threaten the archers, but they'll be quickly seen off by a volley of arrows. But at the same time, the rangers with great weapons will also be chucking their throwing axes and routing my archers. Right now, they have earned back quite a bit of value, getting a chevron, 900 gold worth of damage value, killing off an eagle claw bolt thrower, and also eliminating my archers, definitely earning back their worth. However, they are a bit far away from reinforcing the rest of the army here. As I was able to rout off one of them, you can see that they're all the way over there. That's because I did send in one elven rangers to deal with these dwarf ambush, and now they're moving in to reinforce the front line. While over here, more and more white lions reinforcing this block fight. Same goes for the rangers here, just trying to grind through all these remaining dwarf infantry. Thoric getting his hands dirty with his armor-piercing damage, also buffing with Rune of Doom. But the dwarf warriors and miners will still be routed off by the more healthy rangers, who still have their martial prowess active, enjoying that melee defense boost. Slayers are still fighting, but against white lions who have heavy armor, most of their damage has been mitigated, and against rangers with their anti-infantry attacks, the complete lack of armor on these dwarf unbreakable infantry means that the rangers will have little difficulty slicing through their hit points. Some quarrelers are still firing, aiming at the Mage of Life, trying to whittle away my healing support, but the rangers are close by to disrupt. Speaking of my life caster, she decided to go physical there, picking up her magic staff and start smacking those dwarf flame cannon crew. Imrik still fighting against the Slayers, but right now most of the Slayer unit has been dealt with, so the White Lions will be moving on to other targets. These ones going after the Tattered Miners should be able to rout them off with their armor-piercing attacks, while the other unit of White Lions will be reinforcing the Mage of Life, who is now threatened by the Rangers with great weapons, the Dwarf Rangers with great weapons, who completely ran out of ammo. Now moving in for melee attacks, their great weapons actually will do nicely against the White Lions, although the White Lions do have the buff of Dragon Horn. Actually, the entire High Elf army has Dragon Horn and are now cleaving apart whatever targets they're fighting in melee. Imrik going after Floric Ironbrow. His melee attack is actually anti-lodge and armor piercing, and with 68 melee attack, 72 melee defense, he will trade really well against Floric Ironbrow, especially when Floric is debuffed by the Lord of Dragons, now down to 5 attack, 26 melee defense. I do think that Imrik is a very good buff bot, providing some nice supporting abilities at a relatively cheap cost. His Dragon Minafnir might be strong, but it is way too vulnerable to enemy missiles, so it is better to actually bring him on foot in certain matchups like against the Dwarves. At the back here, we have some more Rangers who dealt with their earlier targets and will be reinforcing against the Rangers with great weapons. Rangers with great weapons being buffed up by Rune of Doom, having 47 melee attack is now more than enough to cut through the 28 melee defense of the White Lions, who lost their martial prowess. But the reinforcing Elven dual-wielding Rangers should be able to turn this fight around with their anti-infantry attacks. Now Imrik trading against Floric Ironbrow, even receiving some healing the Earth Blood from the live mage. Now it is obvious that dwarves are in a pretty big disadvantage, with Floric struggling in the duel against Imrik, who is a great fighter with or without his mount. This might be a hot take, but I do think that Imrik on foot is a very solid lord choice, probably my favorite among the High Elves. He is a great fighter that is relatively cheap with an army-wide attack buff, and plus he has Lord of Dragons that can target not only characters but also counteract other elite units, providing massive stat debuffs. Anyways, back to the battle. Elven Rangers, with the help of some returning archers, have routed off the remaining Dwarf infantry. Floric tries to avenge his fallen brethren with a Rune of Wrath and Ruin, but he himself got hacked down by Imrik's anti-lodge armor-piercing attacks. GG to my opponent, Fat Kid at Recess here, as his ranger with great weapons did succeed in ambushing my backline, earning back their own value and then some more. But for the rest of the army here, most of their units didn't quite earn back their worth. The flame cannons got pressured by the eagle clubbolt first, and then the archers, and then the melee infantry, so their damage was quite limited, while the infantry didn't really trade well against my White Lions and Rangers, especially the Slayers here being forced to fight Rangers. They took a lot of casualties in there, and they themselves, their anti-lodge didn't do anything against my full infantry army. The Dwarf Warriors got hacked apart by the White Lions of Trace. Same goes for the Miners, with their blasting charges mostly mitigated by the armor and missile resistance of the White Lions. While the Quarrelers here, one of them earned back their worth, the other one not so much, being tied down by the Rangers. As for Floric himself, sitting on top of a toilet seat definitely is not an ideal position to fight an elite duelist, so he himself didn't do much damage either. For the High Elf side here, the White Lions being buffed up by the High Elf Wa, the Dragon Horn from Imrik, did some pretty good damage against the Dwarf infantry frontline, hacking down hundreds and hundreds of dwarves. As for the Eagle Clubbolt Fur, due to my lack of dedicated protection for them, they got shredded by the throwing axes. Rangers got some good trade against the Slayers, all thanks to their anti-infantry bonus, and also did some okay damage against the Miners as well, though their lack of armor piercing did slow them down when they are fighting a bunch of heavily armored Miners and Dwarf Warriors. For the archers, they got blasted by the flame cannon, so not much to be said about them. Only one of them earned back their worth. For the single entities here, Mage of Life was there for healing, while Imrik did earn back his value and still have gas for a lot more damage. Again, a duelist with great stats, anti-lodge and armor piercing, he can be good in quite a few matchups, I do believe. Anyways, this is the end of today's battle. I hope you all enjoy it, and if you want to see more Total War Warhammer multiplayer action, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.